Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to APQC's February KM webinar. So last month, to kick off the year, we started with change management and culture and those kinds of topics. Today, we're going to look a little bit more on the KM technology side and hear about how knowledge hubs are key to a successful digital customer and employee experience. And I know digital transformation and how good knowledge management technology fits into that is a hot topic for our audience. So I'm looking forward to this, and I hope you all are too. So to learn more about knowledge hubs, I'm going to pass you over to our speaker, Sam Hahn, and he is technology evangelist at eGain. So hi, Sam, welcome to the webinar.
Hey, Lauren, thanks for having eGain. Thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure to join you this morning.
Fantastic. And I did want to say that Sam and I were talking, he would really like the webinar to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, please do put those in the Q&A window throughout, and he's going to address them, as they come in or as close to that as possible. And I'm going to keep an eye on that as well. And we'll just try to make it conversational and share some great content, and also make sure that any questions or comments get answered.
Yep, that's awesome. And I really appreciate the opportunity to join you because I'd like to learn more about who's actually here. So we've got two questions we want to ask you, and they're just very simple questions. This should go very quickly. The first thing is, in your experience, when you've been doing this, what are your barriers? What have you seen when modernizing knowledge management for your enterprise? So I'm just trying to get a quick sense of that. Are you saying, hey, what you've got is good, or do you need more support from senior leadership? Do you need to justify it? Do you think that KMS implementations are too long and too expensive and too hard to manage? Or is it hard to make an ROI story? Or give me other reasons, but these are some of the things we've typically seen. So I'd like to get a sense of what we've got here in the experience base here today. So let's let this run for just a few more seconds, and then we'll summarize and take a look at the results.
That sounds great. And Sam, it looks like people are putting a couple of other things in the chat, that they need more technical SMEs to help manage the database on top of normal job duties, support from senior leadership and limited tools, KM is seen as just another project, lack of staff, capacity, no one has time. So lots of different answers coming through the chat as well as through the poll. Great.
Nothing too surprising, but it's good to see the breadth of experience. It really shows that you guys have been trying and trying to make this thing work. Okay, do we have the results, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, so it looks like 31%, the top answer is difficult to show ROA post-implementation. So I think that's often a challenge. And then the second biggest challenge is lack of support from senior leadership. And then the third one is that the KM system implementations are too long and expensive.
Okay, that's awesome, because I've actually included at the tail end of this 4 specific case studies that really have some good metrics. I know metrics are very important here. So really highlights some of the measurable impacts of doing knowledge management in a pretty well experienced way. So I just want to make sure that those who are really concerned about the ROI can actually see those 4 case studies toward the end of the session here, okay? All right, shall we move on to the second question, Lauren? All right. So for those of you who have deployed and your users are actually using this on a regular basis, I'm curious, how many of your users would actually characterize themselves as happy or even ecstatic? How many are just merely satisfied? Hey, it's pretty good. Some are, how many are, let's say, irritated by 1 or 2 things? And then how many are really, really unhappy to the point of, hey, please get rid of this thing? So we're seeing that, across the board, when people come to us, they've had this range of experience with their users. So I'm curious to see where we are in this particular group of people here today.
So Sam, there's a couple of comments. At first, I wanted to mention a couple on the first question that came in. Vendor lock-in and too many different IT solutions and strong demand for KM, but tight budgets this year. And then on this question, somebody asked, what if you have all four? Depends on the user. Or, we're waiting to share more. Not everyone has access right now. People are happier with the new system than the old. Hard to get hours allocated. So I think you're all over the map. And then
Okay.
you should be seeing the overall survey results there. About 53% say they're satisfied, 33% dissatisfied, 9% on that very high, happy or ecstatic, and 5% very unhappy to hating. So a lot of people in the middle there, I think.
Okay, that's good to know. And basically what I'm trying to get a sense of is when we actually do engage in a conversation with people who are in the middle of it or restarting it or really trying to improve how they're doing, it's these set of issues that we really want to be able to address. And the more we know about this going in, the better we can prepare our content so that we can actually have the most beneficial conversations possible, okay? So it's good to know that you've got about 9% that are in that very happy category. Our experience is that you can get there if you've actually put some care and feeding and nurturing into your knowledge management system and the entire set of processes around it. And typically you're going to have to get there over some number of iterations. And it's very, very doable. In fact, some of those case studies I'll mention later on definitely show you what some of those very happy, very ecstatic customers are saying, okay? So
Sam, we had a couple of questions in the chat around whether you could define a KMS or knowledge management system in the context that you're talking about it,
okay.
and how it might be different from a repository or a knowledge base. So I think that might be helpful to start with.
There are many formal definitions, okay? I'm going to introduce a casual definition, which I find very useful, and then I'll sort of sprinkle around it the formalities as I go through the talk. Hopefully that's okay, okay? So from a CMS to a KMS, think about it this way, because I do find it useful. A CMS is stuff that's in a repository that should be useful. Somebody should be able to take advantage of it. It should be relevant at some point, whereas a knowledge management system must be useful, must be relevant, okay? So when people come into a portal saying, I got to find a solution, otherwise I'm going to be very unhappy with you, enterprise, okay? They expect to find a solution. When an agent is looking through a large corpus of knowledge or content, as you say, they must find a good, relevant, targeted solution, okay? So I would say that's really kind of the main difference. It highlights the process, it highlights the care, it highlights the nurturing of that. And obviously there's many other formal definitions, but I find that this slice through how you think about content versus knowledge, I mean, I understand it's not very common to find this discussion, so I'm just sort of introducing this here to see if it's useful to you. But that's one way that I would like to talk about, because then what you're really trying to do with the KMS, the knowledge management system, sorry, I'm speaking too fast. The knowledge management system that you're actually trying to give to your users has to be well thought out, has to respond to the right search terms, has to respond to the right points in your portal where you're exposing them, has to be available to the agent at the right time, has to be responsive to the right search terms, okay? And so you can't compromise, or you don't want to compromise. When you really sort of say, hey, I've made a big investment in knowledge management, it cannot be hit or miss. I can't be sitting with a 50% relevance metric at the end of the day. I want it up around 80 or 90 or even higher. So I would say that's the mission critical aspect that to me gives a sense of urgency, a sense of care, a sense of process, a sense of quality around knowledge management. Now, obviously you can talk about how it gets written up, who the experts are, how you deploy it. But think in this one dimension of it should be useful or it must be useful. I'm hoping that that would be a good way for us to think about this going in. And if you want to, talk about that, then let's have some back and forth on this as well. Is that a reasonable first start at this?
I think that's great. And if additional questions come up, we'll address them.
Awesome. So let me introduce myself. Let me introduce eGain. Let me introduce the topic at hand here. And that is eGain is about 24, going on 25 years old now this year. And what's interesting is it was founded only about a handful of years right after the introduction of the internet, right after it got popular. So we were founded in 97. Internet, depending on who you were, you downloaded your first browser probably in 91 if you were a geek or a nerd, probably, you know, mid 90s if you're not quite so right on the boundary right there, okay? But the premise that eGain was founded on was that, wow, this internet thing is cool. Pretty soon, all customer engagement, or a lot of customer engagement, okay, will be leveraging this digital platform. And this is way back before we had, you know, high speed, way back before we had gigabit speeds. You know, even when we had, if you remember, dial-up modems, you know, that's the state of the art in the mid 90s. And in 97, eGain was created and founded to say, eventually, customer interaction is gonna go digital. And so the first channels that we introduced were mail and then chat. Chat was a very early capability that we introduced that, wow, you know, it's been around for quite a long time. And now, of course, it's just taken as, hey, obviously everybody has chat. It's kind of a given these days. But back then it wasn't. So imagine, you know, those days. So that was the premise under which eGain was founded. So we found then that not only do you improve the customer engagement process when you actually digitize it, make it immediately available, okay, and you route right to the correct agent, but now inside that session, you got to make sure the right content, the right knowledge is available to the agent and to the customer. And I'll say a few more words about that a few slides later on. And then wrapping around all of this is a set of analytics capabilities so that you can actually very, very carefully monitor what's going on, get feedback, get those little improvements that you can do frequently. And that, of course, then adds up to big changes over time. Now, we actually are serving large enterprises. These are typically enterprises with a couple hundred agents to 5 figures, believe it or not. So we actually have a solution that's been proven to scale. So we're not bragging about that, but we're saying because of that, we have some experience that we can share with you about what's worked, what's not worked. And then there's just a wide variety of deployments and special cases around each specific customer. And so those are all very good stories we can get into. And by the way, this talk is obviously an invitation to a conversation with me, with my colleagues. If any of this is interesting to you, that's my job, is to make it interesting to you so that you're compelled to have a follow-up conversation with Lauren, with myself, with my fellow colleagues. And that's my objective here today, okay? All right, so let's go on to what we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna spend just a little bit of time talking about what digital experience is and how it's being delivered today, okay? And then we'll talk about why a knowledge hub, the advantages of it, and what it's really doing for, you know, thinking about the problem and what it's delivering to our customers. And then we'll give you some very specific case studies, okay? We're actually not going to do a demo today. I should have taken that off of the slide. So rather than waiting for the end to do Q&A, Lauren, hopefully you're monitoring the questions that do come in. So pepper them through this and we'll try and do this in real time. And I'll try and keep an eye on the time so we don't go over. But if I get towards about, let's say 5 or 10 minutes towards the top of the hour, give me a little sign and then I'll make sure that we wrap up with the right points, okay? So that's how we're going to do the session today. So first, what is the state of the practice today? Now, it's interesting that Lauren mentioned digital transformation, because digital transformation for the last several years has been such a hot topic and businesses really knew they had to go digital, whatever that meant to them, okay? Now, COVID obviously accelerated that whole process. And what happened? So people built the pipes, what I call, you know, the chat channels, the email channels, the self-service portals, the connections to Facebook, connections to Instagram, connections to Twitter. Those channels, those pipes got built. And there was a big investment there, okay? Now, it's probably the case that this group probably has a bit more awareness of the next point I'm about to make, okay? So bear with me a little bit, but with most groups I'm talking to, that investment in these channels was the focus. Let's get them online. Let's get them immediately routed to the right agent. Let's get the agent interacting, with chat, with video, with email, with whatever, okay? Let's do that. And clearly there was a big investment made there and a lot of it succeeded, right? All these pipes got laid. And now what's the result? Well, when we look at what the customer's experience is, and we look at their journeys and how often they go from page to page before they contact an agent, or how often they go to a shopping cart, whether or not they actually conclude a transaction or whatever, we noticed a number of things. Customers are engaged, they're asking questions, that's a good thing, and they're taking advantage of these channels. But what else is happening, okay? Why is it not resulting in the metrics improvements that we're all expecting when we actually made all these large investments? Well, it turns out that we were not the only ones to observe this. The largest analysts here who actually are surveying the industry are saying, hey, if you just deliver this stuff on a website and you call it self-service, still customers are abandoning those sessions 90% of the time. That's an extremely high number. That means they can't find what they need. And the pain when you actually survey them is, hey, we're not finding the right, correct, consistent answers. There's the mom and dad issue as well. I talk to an agent here, they tell me one thing. I talk to another agent the next day or 30 minutes later, I get some inconsistent responses, okay? That's a huge issue that results in distrust, not just of the response, not just of the answer, but of the actual company itself, okay? You're saying, yeah, what gives? What's really the truth? So if you go dig deeper into the numbers, it's that 34% of these customer service agents, they don't know the answer. They don't have a system that bolsters them so that they actually have access at their fingertips to the right answer. And I'm going to mention that in a flip side in a few minutes as well. And the thing that I mentioned about the mom and dad experience, 41% of these people are experiencing that. I go to mom, I go to dad, I get a different answer, okay? They can't find the answer on the website. And there's a whole set of other peripheral issues as well, but the top three are already bad enough. But what's common about all three? It's common, okay? You can probably see it already, okay? Now, from an agent's perspective, forget the customer for the moment. That was what the customer was experiencing. Now, from an agent's perspective, they're also citing they can't get the right knowledge. They can't get the right answer easily, okay? And so because of that, look at this very, very high number, 84%. If 84% of these agents dislike/hate their tools, what do you think that does to retention? What do you think that does to their morale? What do you think that does to the tenor of the conversation with a customer? What do you think that does to the confidence they have when they actually give an answer to a customer? It's abysmal, right? It's clearly not good. Okay, so we looked at the customer perspective, we looked at the agent perspective. Now, here's the business perspective, okay? We've seen in the last couple of years, a lot of people go remote. Some retail sites still have not opened. Maybe recently they have, okay? But we know some customers that had 600 retail centers where all of those people were then not available to go and service customers at the retail point of presence. So now you got two choices, let them go, or you reassign them onto chat, onto email, onto some other channel like social, like texting, okay? So 90% of these remote workers, they're actually now very used to this. Do they want to go back to work? A lot of them say no. I mean, what I mean is not work, but go back to a central call center where they have to commute to every day, okay? And then so you've got 37% are predicting that they're reducing the number of in-person days for people who are wanting to work remotely. Okay, this is a Gallup poll. Add to that the senior generation, And you can see that over 50% of them, they're retired. That's 3.5 million more than pre-COVID levels, okay? And not only that, once they go, they're not coming back. So this compounds the problem for the enterprise and compounds it for the customer because you don't have the right agents, they're not knowledgeable. And look at the last point here, they're training programs. They can't do face-to-face training anymore. All that training has to be done remotely. So all of this is pointing to the fact that the premise under which eGain was founded has definitely come to pass, okay? I like to say in a tongue-in-cheek way, COVID found us prepared, okay? Because we had a solution that then was clearly the right solution for people that needed to work remotely, needed to work online, and needed then to be able to have the right digital resources at their fingertips rather than going to the water cooler, sharing an anecdote, going to a lunch, having a sandwich, talking to the senior SME. Now we need to be able to get that level of interaction with the platform, the knowledge management platform. Okay, so you've been clearly seeing the build up here. Okay, what was missing is once the channels are built, you have to have good quality something going through those channels. Imagine that these are pipes. You have to have good clean water or good nutritious food, good juice, for example, going through these pipes. You don't want sludge going through these pipes, okay? Crude metaphor, sorry about that, okay? But it's a very easy way to think about it. The investment in the channels was insufficient if you're not also investing in what goes through the channels. And what goes through the channels is not just something in a repository. It's got to be presented at the right time, in a timely manner, to the right place, the right agent, the right question, the right service portal to the customer. So all of that is part of what makes a hub really effective. It's not just static content. It's not just static knowledge even, okay? It's got to be presented. It's got to be routable. It's got to be searchable. It's got to be maintained. It's got to be personalized. I'll talk more about that one also, okay? So that, if done well, can say the investment in these pipes was well worth it. And now you can actually realize the dream that you really made that investment for, which is customers finding their own solutions, agents being happy because they have the right thing, the knowledge at their fingertips, being able to service the right customer at the right time without the customer coming back. You really want to cut down on those repeat requests coming into the contact center. And you really do that by effectively increasing the first call resolution, okay? Solve the problem right the first time, okay? So Gartner summarizes it by saying knowledge management is the #1 technology that can simultaneously elevate customer, agent, and business experience in 2022 and beyond. Okay, so if you actually know these people and know who they talk to and give them credibility, because they actually do a survey of all the offerings in this space, it is the #1 investment area that will very, very much make that turn from dissatisfied customer to a happy and ecstatic customer, okay? That's knowledge management. So let's talk about the hub. Why? What? Okay, and then how. Gartner was very specific, and we're going to follow their model because it's actually a very effective model. So I'm not going to read these here, but I'm going to go through them one by one in the next 7 points here and really say, start outside in, which is point #1, and then we'll go through all the rest, okay? So this knowledge hub that I'm talking about is, as I mentioned, not just a knowledge repository. It's got to be connected. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be well organized. It has to be well curated. It has to have obsolete items removed. It has to be personalized. That is all what you want from a knowledge hub. So it's not just the content. It's not just the knowledge. It's not just that static stuff, okay? And static is key because I'm going to talk about that in a few slides. So when you do it right, you want knowledge to be fun for customers, for the agent, and then effectively for the business. Because if they're getting the right answer, they're not searching around, they're not frustrated, and it's immediate, and it's responsive, and it's correct. This really changes the game. So now, rather than frustrated agents and frustrated customers, if they're getting the right answer, boy, those sessions get to be very, very quick. Those survey responses go way up. The agents are now happy, and they're not leaving quite so in such mass droves, okay? So this is what you want to deliver to the enterprise, to the agents, and to the customers. So, as I mentioned, these are the key elements of the hub, okay? It's got to be a single platform. It's got to reach, to all of the stuff that you want to make available, okay? And you want to make it managed and well taken care of, and well collated and well authored. So the workflow around each of these areas is really key, starting from what is the white space. And by white space, what I mean is when people are coming with questions and they're providing these questions in the form of search or questions, are those resulting in good relevant hits? If not, that's white space, and that's an opportunity for you actually to create knowledge, to go talk to the right SME, to actually then provide it, and to fill in that hole in your knowledge repository. Okay, so that's the connecting and collecting. By writing it once, this means you're actually taking a look at what's needed. You're actually addressing what the questions that are going to be derivative questions are, so you can actually address those and anticipate them. And then you want to, over time, take this static knowledge and automate it. That's the really exciting part, okay? Is that once you've got some knowledge that's very relevant, that's actually resulting in very high scores in customer satisfaction and in agent satisfaction, the next step is to automate it. Put it into a bot, put it into a wizard, put it into a series of questions that you don't have to create trees for, okay? You just write questions, you give them weights, and all of a sudden now the system can figure out what next to ask the customer or to ask the agent, okay? And now you also want to expose this knowledge, both the static form and the automated form, in every channel that you've invested in. Don't make these silos, don't have these research projects that are not connected to everything else. Make sure that the knowledge you have, immediately when you bring on a new channel, like SMS was the last couple of years for people, that knowledge is immediately available to SMS. But pay attention to the customer experience on a per channel basis. You might have to, shrink some of those texts that go out on text. You may want to make sure these are long running processes, because people are not going to necessarily respond right away to text. People are accustomed to waiting quite a while. They're doing it on their time, okay? And always, always, always be tracking. Always, always, always be measuring. That's something that's, I'm sure, top of mind for this group, but we're finding that without that feedback loop, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to actually make those small incremental per sprint, per iteration kinds of improvements that then show that evolution of performance over time. Okay, so that was the first point is, hey, Lauren, good to see you again. Is there a question?
There is. So I wanted to address a couple of questions and comments in the chat around, I think that a lot of our audience thinks of knowledge management as a broader program that includes people, process, and technology. Obviously, you're a technology evangelist. That's the focus here. But I wanted to kind of ask you, especially looking at the kind of process steps that you had on the last slide, how you think about enabling the business processes that go into this and motivating people, and how you see the technology fitting into that broader picture of what I would think of as a knowledge management program, specifically around kind of your audience, which tends to be, I think, customer service agents and things like that.
Right. So that's a real good topic. And this, in fact, could be a whole webinar all on itself. But let me just bring up 3 points, okay? One is, if you're thinking in terms of the authors, the people that are actually creating the knowledge and actually curating this, and by the way, I'm a technology evangelist, but let me just do a small aside. There was a fellow who was very famous a few years ago who invented the mouse. His name is Doug Engelbart. He was often known as a technologist, but he often saw that the human side was always the gating factor in whether technology rollouts were going to be successful or not. So I, as a self-proclaimed disciple of Doug's, am really trying to be looking at those. I haven't yet spent much time mentioning that here, but that's definitely top of mind for me. Because if you're actually doing this well, I'll give you another example, okay? In fact, I'll just hit one of those case studies early. We rolled out a knowledge management solution to a company that made a single promise. The promise they made their users was any suggestion that those users made, the knowledge management team, the authoring team, promised that within 24 hours, they would give them a response. The response could be, hey, not going to do it, or more likely, hey, this is important, we're going to do it, and here's the time frame. So that kind of feedback to users, where users are saying, hey, I'm not just a victim of this platform, I'm not just a victim of this tool here, I'm actually helping this tool get better. That really gets adoption way up, okay? So that's point number one. Point number two is what I'm saying is, when we're buying knowledge and intelligence-based products, this is not the typical software purchase, right? A typical software purchase is you're going to come up with a list of use cases, translate that to features, take off your box, buy what's the maximum. You sum up the weights and the scores. You do the big sigma, and you make your decision. Okay. The difference in knowledge and intelligence, and in particular in intelligent agent solutions, is you have to think of it as an entity who can learn and grow. So on day one, they may behave like a toddler behaves, right? They're going to get clearly obvious things wrong. But if you get impatient with that and say, this is a failure, you're not giving yourself a chance. But if you say, oh, I can easily correct that because I can tweak this, I can actually refine the search, I can refine the way this article is offered, and we can actually then personalize it differently, then you go into this stage where behavior improves over time. And that's the way I think the mind shift around knowledge and AI and machine learning and intelligence and bots needs to evolve, okay? It's not just a feature checklist, it's an evolutionary thing. And what does that mean? It means you have to be willing to put up with that growth over time. And you need to be able to invest in that growth as well. And so once you do that, now, you're saying, I'm proud of this toddler because now he's growing into a teenager, not that, oh, this is the toddler, so I'm just gonna not use it. So I think that there's definitely a mindset there that's part of the culture. I said there were three things. What was my third thing? But anyway, those are at least 2 points that I wanted to bring up. And hopefully that gives you a sense that that culture thing is way more important than the technology, right? The technology is simple, there's facts. The adoption has to do with the way people feel, and that first impression can turn somebody off so significantly. So you really want to, plan out that experience of how you introduce technology, have the right champions. Oh, that was my third point, right? Was that executive sponsorship and leadership? You can't get away from that. If it's the team at the department level, basically trying to clamor to be heard, those are going to take way more time to succeed than if you've got somebody at the top who actually believes in this. And we're finding that if companies are actually now introducing a title called the CXO, the Chief Experience Officer, or Chief Customer Experience Officer, we're finding those are very good champions to go out and say, this group will actually do really innovative things to try and bring a better experience to my customers. And that's definitely a key element of making sure that that culture is conducive to this kind of change and this kind of innovation. So I hope I didn't go too long with that, but I just want to make sure that we address that culture issue because, yeah, we see it all the time.
No, I think that's great context. I've got a couple of more specific questions, but I think we should roll for a little bit, and if they don't get answered, I'll be sure to circle back.
Okay, cool. So let me go on to my next point. I think most of these points have been made. Okay. So let me see if I want to spend much time on this one. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on that one because I think we've been answering a lot of questions right now. This is a standard message here, which is if you have a solution that actually has all the integrations, all the channels, all the configurable items for personalization, for searching, for putting up the right kind of portals, you're going to cut down on the time it takes. Okay. Now, it is true that some people just like putting together best of breed and then do all the integrations themselves. But we are finding that if you've already got a platform that has already thought about these issues for the last, I would say, more than 2.5 decades, then you're actually starting with a key advantage. You're not starting at the starting point. You're actually starting where other people have actually learned a lot of very expensive lessons. And so that's definitely something to trade off, is whether you don't need the absolute best search or whatever, or the best machine language algorithm by 0.1% or whatever, or whether you've actually got something that is already working as a whole and just ready to turn on. Okay, so that's typically addressed as a silo question, and this is fairly standard. Okay, I'm going to come back to this because this is an offer we want to make. If any of this is interesting, we, at our own dime, on our own time, at our own risk, are just asking for a couple of conversations over the span of about 30 days. No other investment from you. We will actually show you this working on your, I'll say, front page. We'll scrape your front page. We'll actually, do a little bit of guessing about what customers come to you for. And we'll put together something that's based on our off-the-shelf products. And won't have any of those fancy integrations, but at least you'll see what it looks like on your own site, okay? So that's an offer that's I'll make now, and I'll kind of repeat that at the end of the session here, okay? Okay. The way we actually do this is that we put something in front of you so that you can actually just get that customer experience. What is it like to interact with a solution that's already available to turn on your website with just a little simple tag? Or you can actually start a chat queue, or build an integration with Twitter, or build an integration with SharePoint, very, very quickly, okay? That's the wow factor that we'd like to deliver to you. Okay, this is a fairly standard engineering kind of question, but it's obviously, do you bring in the content? Do you actually copy the content? Do you leave it where it is? Do you just federate it? And we've thought through all of these questions. And clearly, there's categories of knowledge in all of these different cases, okay? But we think about it methodically. So there's clearly some that you migrate immediately. There's some that you federate and then migrate. And then there's some you leave out there, okay? Because they're very, very effective where they are, okay? You just want your search to reach out there. You just want your retrieval to be able to get them. Or there's some that you just want to eliminate over time. And that's also a big category of things. There's a lot of obsolete content / knowledge out there, okay? And we have very, very experienced people that have gone through these, have done this with customers, have led these kind of efforts. So we're going to actually give you something that works today, and then this transition can happen as you feel comfortable. This search thing is typically where I introduced the knowledge white space concept, but I think I did that a couple slides ago. I want to address a little bit about personalization, though, is that when we actually let your authoring team put together this knowledge, we actually have translations, we have personalizations by role. So in other words, when you've got a junior agent, we can allow a more elaborate processes, elaborate detail in the knowledge that we're putting in front of a relatively junior agent. Or we can actually make it much more concise and much quicker for an experienced agent. We have all kinds of personalization. And in fact, we're experimenting now with matching up qualities of the agent with qualities of the customer that will aid to that empathic connection that agents will have with customers, okay? And we've had customers experiment with this, if somebody's into fishing, let's just give that as an example. we've had customers very, very curious about adding that to their agent profiles and actually doing some routing and some agent matching using some of these filters. And you would think that, hey, that's just a little thing, but no, that's the degree of connection that you can enhance if you just share one or two little attributes with your customers. They can have this informal conversation, and it's not just all about, push this button, click over there, blah, 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 okay? We're introducing a lot more machine learning into the anticipation of what the customer really wants, okay? So when a customer requests a session, either on the service web self-service site or in a chat request form, we actually then look at the form of that sentence, and over time, with experience, we can do a fairly good job of categorization. So we've got this hybrid approach of machine learning with symbolic knowledge, and that all working together to deliver better and better performance. And all of that enhances search as well as the actual knowledge articles that are presented. There's natural language understanding. I'm not going to go through every single box here because I think we're going to have to wrap up in about 8 or 9 minutes here. But I really wanted to make sure that we understood those aspects. Okay, here's the automation point that I was talking about before, okay? When you actually have a very good understanding of the top 3 or 5 or 8 reasons that customers come to you, okay? Now, instead of just say, hey, agent, do this, because you really know how to handle that solution, now you can actually think about not taking the agent's time and putting this now into an automated form. And we give you a very easy way to do this. The case study I'll give you there is someone actually rolled out in 6 weeks our very first deliverable, which was a chatbot. Okay, this is a financial services company. And within a small number of weeks, this enterprise with its team was able to understand what was going on well enough that they now took responsibility for enhancing that bot and really driving up performance of that bot. What's even more exciting is that they said, well, this is working well enough for our self-service and our chat team. Can it work for our internal team? And they actually said, let's deploy a second bot. And it was an internal IT help desk bot. Not only were they successful with that, they immediately said, well, now let's apply this to HR. Let's answer some employee questions. So the way that you author the automation around this knowledge is so easy that our customers are coming up with these ideas themselves and then just taking responsibility for themselves and just creating these things. Okay, I think that customer ended up with somewhere around 4 or 5 different deployments of automated agent technology. And that's just one example. We actually have others, but that was kind of like the one that I was most familiar with. So all of this says it's not trees that you have to write. It's not code that you have to write. You're writing questions and you're giving possible answers and you're weighting some of these things. That's it, okay? Then the system figures out what's the next best question I can ask of the agent or of the customer. And then that's the way it reasons about, what next question to pose. So there's no fixed tree, there's no fixed path. The system will figure it out if you've thought through this question and decided, what parts of the problem to automate. Sorry, the solution to automate. So with this, yes, Lauren, do we have more questions? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I just had a question that came in that I think relates to that use case 4, which is around how a knowledge hub either overlaps or potentially replaces a customer data platform. So I thought this would be a good place to address that.
Okay, so if you're going with small efforts, either you're building a knowledge platform or you're building a bot slash virtual agent slash automation platform. And what happens, okay? If the agent is just repeating themselves, okay, they're getting frustrated. It's always the same thing. But on the other hand, if you're actually doing the automation and the automation is not doing a good enough job for the customers, what's the result? There's no place to go. The right solution is when you actually have a hub where when the agent says, okay, I've solved the hard part of the problem, Now let's turn the easy part of the rest of this session to a bot, and that can happen seamlessly. On the other side, you can have a bot, try its best. And if the customer says, I'm just not happy, give me to a live agent, you need that transition, that escalation be seamless as well. Without a platform where both are seamlessly possible, we can transition, And by the way, when the agent transitions it to a bot, the agent is still there looking at what the bot is doing and can still respond when the bot doesn't do well. So with a platform that's well conceived, well designed for customer experience, then you've got this very seamless way to go back and forth. And so that's what I would recommend. So hopefully that answers the question, but I just want to present that integrated solution where you're not just looking at one or the other, you're actually looking at the best way to deploy both. I don't think there's anybody right now that's saying bots will do everything, I'll get rid of all of our live agents. So that interaction, that transfer back and forth is definitely key in assuring a good customer experience. So if that's not sufficient, please come back, Lauren, but hopefully we can address that in more detail at the end if that was insufficient, okay? So I was talking about virtual agents here. I think I made most of these points. Yes, these handoffs, that's what the yellow box was saying, is the key in a platform is these handoffs have to be very smooth, and you don't want to ask repetitive questions, and you want the consumer, the customer, to be aware of what's happening when, and yet always have the confidence that the agent is overseeing the session, so they're never going to get locked into a horrible situation. I can tell you about some of my sessions I've been on the last several days. I'll do that at the end, maybe. Okay, so this contextualization, okay? So this gets into how these articles and these automated processes, we call them guided processes. We also call them guided help. We also call this, by the way, the technology underneath it is case-based reasoning, which, by the way, we've had since the late 90s, because AI is actually older than just the machine learning that you've been hearing about the last 3 or 4 years, or 10 years, okay? But it actually goes way back, and some of those technologies are still deployed today. And when you marry them up, with the machine learning stuff, exciting things happen, okay? So what we're talking about here is you got to be aware of when this knowledge is being presented. Do you want to present an entire paragraph? Do you want to present just a snippet when it's on text? You got to be aware of that device, the form factor, the display size. You got to look at what portal this question was asked in, and do you then want to provide links, or are there, no possibility to actually bring in video data or all that? So all of this contextualization, all of this personalization is something that the knowledge authors can take into account, and then just simply tag their content, and the right thing will then happen, because you characterize the portals, you characterize the queues, you characterize the agents, even the language and the geography, and all of this then is taken into account when you deliver the right content as is needed, okay? This last one is something all of you probably know much better than I do, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this area has been around at least 20 years. So let's just say it's just par for the course. You got to do it, and you got to optimize, and I think you're already familiar with who can do that for you, okay? Okay, now let me get into my case studies, okay? So I've just got a few minutes here. This first one, I think I've got 4 case studies here, is a very, very large company. They got 30,000 contact center agents in 5,000 retail stores, okay? Now, imagine what happens when those of you who are responsible for customer experience want to see the customer experience scores go up, okay? If you're using Net Promoter System, some people call it Net Promoter Score, okay? And you know how hard it is to get the customer to say they're a 9 or a 10. If they're 8 or below, not good enough. How hard is it to get a customer to say 9 or 10? Now, if you improve that percentage by 25 absolute points, that's typically, investments of millions and millions in a company this size, 30,000 agents, millions of sessions, okay, millions and billions of customers. So imagine this kind of impact working for you, where you can go from 50 to 75 or 30 to 55. That's the kind of NPS improvement we're actually seeing here, okay? And now, measurably, the first contact resolution improved 35%. Those are sessions that are not coming back into the contact center. Those are not dissatisfied customers that are going to come back and be irate. These are happy people who have solved their problem and gone away, okay? Now imagine also taking half of your training time to get a new hire to the level of competence they need to be, because they're not looking through handbooks of hundreds and hundreds of products. They're learning how to use a knowledge management system and letting that be the secret weapon for them, okay? So these training times went from 6 weeks to 3 weeks. And imagine, what that is over thousands and thousands of agents. So this is pretty good ROI, I would say, and I think most of us would be happy to experience that. Now here, this is another one that, this is a very fast-growing company. 40% top-line growth is to be admired. And what happened here is agents measurably were more confident by 60% in the answers that they could provide their customers, okay? Not only that, customers, because they trusted the knowledge, they trusted what was being given them, there's a 30% improvement in the use and adoption of the web self-service portal, okay? And this is done in 9 months. Take a look at that, okay? This happens to be the IRS. This is one that we're actually very happy with because it's tough to get into that business, okay? But imagine what happens if for all of your incoming calls, you take 70% of them and you then service those with a bot that you can offer, okay? When somebody comes in through, let's say, a smartphone. Let's imagine that the agent engagement, okay, which is their success with the session here, is about 25%. Is that 25%? Yeah, 25% higher than the rest of the industry, okay? Those are real numbers. The case handling time also reduced by about 25%. And you got a lot more taxpayers utilizing the system from an efficiency standpoint, okay, from a time standpoint, okay? And they're now servicing 50 million taxpayers. That's you, that's me, okay, in the system. By the way, when I say it's tough to do business with them, you have to certify a degree of reliability and security and identity protection that's very, very difficult to meet. There's a standard called FedRAMP. Some of you are probably aware of this. And so we recently just got FedRAMP approved at a particular use level. And that took 2 years for us to get. It's a big investment, but now we're in there. Now we're actually trusted by some of the most sensitive departments in the national government. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about is a health insurance company where, because of COVID, 2,000 agents went remote. And because they were using a knowledge management system that was easy to learn and had the right information, the right knowledge at the right fingertips, it didn't impact the way they were able to serve their customers, okay? All of their metrics stayed even. And there was, again, a 1/3 reduction in the agent training time, okay? Here's a nice quote. My agents love eGain's Knowledge 360. It's super efficient, easy to utilize, single source of truth. Use it every day, okay? So the story I wanted to leave you is that the platform idea allows you to make sure that all of these channels that you've invested in are easy to transfer and escalate from and to, particularly to a live agent, okay? And the knowledge is something that you can curate and then deliver to all of those different channels. And that the personalization that you've got, the automation around the case-based reasoning and guided help, all effectively means you can start with relatively simple knowledge. You can actually import some knowledge. You can just, start there, automate a little bit, turn it into a bot, build in more channels. And the hub, the platform idea allows you to do this seamlessly without having to struggle with each new vendor, each new silo that you want to bring in. And so I'm going to, again, give you that, that offer, which is something we call IITD, Innovation in 30 Days, okay? Give us a couple or 3 conversations, okay? Give us 30 days. We'll scope out the project. We'll scrape your website. We'll put together a sample for you. We'll give you a demo, and then we'll see where it goes. Just have some mild interest, and then we'll hopefully strengthen that level of interest. And this is how we can show that the 24 years of experience that we've got, especially through the rough times of COVID, can help you. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of this stories here.
Thanks, Sam. And I know we've just got 1 minute or so, but I just wanted to ask one final question, which was really about the bots and how do you ensure a bot is actually helping and leaving users satisfied with the solution? I didn't want to miss that one.
So, okay, so 2 cases, okay? One is, let me talk about the case where the bot is actually just assisting the customer and it hasn't already been through a live agent, okay? There, agents, not agents, customers will tell you. We found customers will definitely tell you whether they're happy or not, okay? Now, typically what you'll find is if it's not a good answer right away, they're typically saying things like, give me to a live agent, okay? Or they're using, words that you don't want to repeat here. We've seen that, all of us technology providers have seen that from customers. What you want to do is be able to escalate those to a live agent quickly, okay? And so we have a technology inside that many of you are familiar with. It's the sentiment analysis. So you can tell that the customer is unhappy either with the duration of the responses or the vehemence of the words that they use, or just the kinds of emphasis they put on certain words, whatever. So all of those factors will allow one to say, okay, I better move this to a live agent quickly, okay? And then you've got the live agent, which is hopefully the best way you resolve this. Now, the other scenario is where you've got a live agent and the live agent has transitioned the session to an automated bot, but is still overseeing the bot's behavior. So they can immediately tell whether or not the customer is saying, hey, this is good or this is not the right thing, and they can immediately intervene. So those are at least those 2 different cases. And there's no magic to it, but we've seen all of these cases. So let's get into those conversations.
Great. Well, I know we are at time. Thank you, Sam, so much for a great presentation. Thanks for everybody for sticking with us online, and I will hopefully see you all next month. Take care.
Thanks again. Yeah.